They say knowledge is power, but they lie. Knowledge without application is merely entertainment. What truly separates the influencers from the influenced, the decision-makers from the decision-followers, is understanding how power actually moves through the world, and it moves nothing like they teach in schools or seminars. Every empire that has ever risen, every fortune that has ever been built, every revolution that has ever succeeded, followed the same invisible blueprint. These are not theories invented by academics sitting in ivory towers. These are the operating principles discovered by men and women who started with nothing and ended up controlling everything: the companies, the governments, the very flow of money itself. The first thing they understand is this: power is not about what people see, it's about what they believe. A reputation for being dangerous is more valuable than actually being dangerous. A whisper of disapproval from the right person carries more weight than a shouted threat from the wrong one. The most powerful individuals in any room are often the ones nobody notices, because they have learned the art of influence without fingerprints. Watch how the truly powerful operate. They never raise their voices because they don't need to. When they speak, rooms go quiet. When they suggest something, it happens. When they express a preference, it becomes policy. This is not because they hold official titles, many of them hold no formal authority at all, but because they understand something that escapes most people entirely. They understand that human beings are not rational creatures who occasionally act on emotion. They are emotional creatures who occasionally think rationally. Every decision, every choice, every action stems from feelings first, then gets justified with logic afterward. Master the emotional triggers, and rational arguments become irrelevant. This revelation changes everything about how they approach relationships, negotiations, conflicts, opportunities. Instead of trying to convince people with facts and figures, they speak to the deeper drives: the need for security, the desire for status, the fear of being left behind, the hunger for meaning, the craving for belonging. But here's where most people go wrong when they discover this principle: they try to manipulate rather than influence. They attempt to create fear rather than inspiring loyalty. They focus on what they can take rather than what they can give. This is the thinking of small minds, and it leads to small, temporary victories that ultimately destroy the foundation for lasting power. The masters of influence think differently. They understand that the most sustainable power comes from making others more successful, more secure, more fulfilled. When people prosper under someone's leadership, they don't just follow that leader, they become personally invested in that leader's continued success. They will defend, protect, and advance those interests even when nobody is watching, because they understand their own prosperity is connected to it. This creates what insiders call the loyalty loop, a self-reinforcing cycle where power grows by being shared wisely. Every person who benefits from the leader's decisions becomes an advocate, a defender, a recruiter for the cause. They bring others into the circle, expanding the network of influence organically, authentically, sustainably. The second principle they all discover is that timing matters more than talent. The most brilliant ideas fail if introduced too early. The simplest strategies succeed if executed at the perfect moment. Power amplifies when it flows with existing currents rather than fighting against them. This is why the successful spend enormous amounts of time studying patterns, in markets, in politics, in social movements, in human behavior itself. They look for the signs that indicate when change is coming, when resistance is weakening, when opportunities are ripening. Then they position themselves to be ready when the moment arrives. Most people react to events after they happen. The powerful anticipate events before they occur. They see the tremors before the earthquake, smell the smoke before the fire, feel the shift in the wind before the storm. This prescience comes not from magical intuition, but from systematic observation combined with deep understanding of cause and effect. They also understand that perception shapes reality more powerfully than most people imagine. What others believe about their capabilities often matters more than their actual capabilities. What people expect from them influences what becomes possible. What reputation precedes them determines how they are received, what opportunities are offered, what level of resistance they encounter. This is why image management becomes crucial as influence grows. Not the superficial image management of marketing and public relations, but the deeper work of ensuring that reputation accurately reflects both current abilities and future intentions. The powerful understand that credibility is their most valuable asset, more precious than money, more important than connections, more essential than talent itself. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to either build or damage this credibility. Every promise made creates an expectation that must be met or exceeded. Every commitment undertaken becomes a test of character that will be remembered long after the specific circumstances are forgotten. This is why they become extremely careful about what they agree to do, knowing that their word becomes their bond in ways that others cannot fully comprehend. The third revelation that separates them from ordinary achievers is understanding the true nature of competition. Most people think competition is about defeating opponents, about winning at others' expense, about proving superiority through conflict. This mindset leads to exhausting battles that consume energy and create enemies unnecessarily. They understand that every decision they make affects not just immediate outcomes, but sets precedents for future decisions. Every use of their influence either builds or damages the foundation for future influence. Every choice they make either enhances or diminishes the trust that others place in them. This sense of stewardship transforms how they approach their roles. They see themselves not as owners of their power, but as custodians of it. They make decisions based not just on what serves their immediate interests, but on what creates lasting value for everyone affected by their choices. The ninth revelation concerns the importance of building systems rather than just achieving results. The most powerful individuals create frameworks, processes, institutions, and cultures that continue to produce value long after their direct involvement ends. They focus not just on solving immediate problems, but on building the capacity to solve future problems. They design organizations that function effectively even in their absence. They develop other leaders who can carry forward their vision and values. They create systems of decision-making that remain sound even when they are not there to guide specific choices. They build cultures that embody their principles and perpetuate their approaches. The final principle that distinguishes them involves understanding that the ultimate goal of power is not control, but influence. Control requires constant energy to maintain and creates resentment that eventually undermines itself. Influence, properly developed, becomes self-sustaining because it aligns with what people want to do anyway. The most effective leaders create conditions where people choose to follow not because they have to, but because they want to. They inspire rather than compel, attract rather than force, guide rather than push. This approach builds loyalty that survives changes in circumstances, dedication that persists through difficulties, and commitment that deepens over time. They understand that the highest form of power is the power to make power unnecessary, to create situations where people do the right things naturally because they understand why those things matter, because they see how their individual success connects to collective success, because they believe in the vision and values being pursued. In the end, those who master these principles discover that power becomes not something they possess, but something they embody. It flows through them rather than belonging to them. It serves purposes larger than their personal interests while simultaneously serving those interests in ways that create no conflict between individual success and collective benefit. This is the secret that the truly powerful understand: real influence comes not from taking control, but from creating alignment. Not from forcing compliance, but from inspiring commitment. Not from defeating opposition, but from transforming opposition into collaboration. Those who learn these lessons while they still have time to apply them, who integrate these principles into their daily decisions and long-term strategies, who commit themselves to this path of development and service, find that power stops being something they chase and becomes something they naturally attract. And in that transformation lies the difference between those who temporarily hold positions of authority and those who permanently change the world around them. The mastery of these principles creates authentic authority, influence that doesn't depend on position or title, but flows naturally from competence, character, and contribution. This is the final secret, the ultimate truth that separates those who merely hold power from those who truly understand it. Real influence is immortal, authentic authority is eternal, and genuine leadership creates ripples that never end. But there's something else they understand that most never discover. Power has its own psychology, its own emotional landscape that must be navigated carefully. The higher someone rises in influence, the more isolated they become from honest feedback, from genuine relationships, from the reality of how their decisions affect others. This isolation is not accidental, it's built into the very structure of power itself. Those who maintain their effectiveness despite this isolation learn to actively counteract it. They create systems to ensure they receive honest feedback. They cultivate relationships with people who knew them before they had power, who will tell them uncomfortable truths. They regularly expose themselves to the consequences of their decisions by spending time with those affected by their choices. They also understand something crucial about the emotional cost of leadership that no one warns them about in advance. The weight of responsibility for others' lives, careers, futures can be crushing if not properly managed. Every decision carries the potential to help or harm people they may never meet. Every choice creates winners and losers, even when made with the best intentions. The masters of power learn to carry this weight without being paralyzed by it. They develop what could be called compassionate detachment, the ability to care deeply about outcomes while accepting that they cannot control all variables, cannot predict all consequences, cannot please everyone affected by their decisions. This balance allows them to remain decisive while staying human. They also discover that power amplifies everything about their personality. Their strengths become more powerful, but their weaknesses become more dangerous. A small character flaw that was manageable when they had little influence becomes a major liability when their decisions affect thousands or millions of people. This is why character development becomes crucial as power grows. The masters of power think strategically about competition. They understand that the goal is not to defeat every potential rival, but to make rivalry irrelevant. They do this by changing the game itself, redefining what success looks like, shifting the playing field to areas where they have natural advantages, creating value in ways that make traditional competition obsolete. Instead of fighting for a larger share of existing markets, they create entirely new markets. Instead of competing for limited resources, they find ways to expand the resources available to everyone. Instead of trying to win zero-sum games, they design positive-sum scenarios where multiple parties can benefit simultaneously. This approach transforms potential enemies into allies, converts competitive relationships into collaborative ones, and eliminates much of the friction that typically accompanies the accumulation of influence. It also creates sustainable advantages that are difficult for others to copy, because they are based on systems and relationships rather than just individual skills or resources. The fourth principle they master is the art of strategic patience. In a world obsessed with immediate gratification, quarterly results, and viral success, they play longer games. They make investments that won't pay off for years or decades. They plant seeds knowing they may never personally harvest the fruit. They think in generations while others think in seasons. This long-term perspective gives them enormous advantages in decision-making. They can afford to pass up profitable opportunities that would compromise their principles or damage their relationships. They can weather temporary setbacks because they are focused on permanent gains. They can make choices that appear sacrificial in the short term but prove strategically brilliant over time. They also understand that compound interest applies to influence just as powerfully as it applies to money. Small, consistent actions accumulate tremendous power over time. A reputation built slowly through countless small demonstrations of integrity becomes unshakable. A network developed gradually through genuine relationship building becomes invaluable. Skills developed patiently through deliberate practice become world-class. The fifth element of their success involves understanding the psychology of influence at a deeper level than most people ever explore. They recognize that different people are motivated by different things, and what works with one personality type may backfire with another. They become students of human nature, learning to read the subtle signs that indicate what each individual truly values, fears, desires, and needs. This is not manipulation in the crude sense that most people imagine. It is the sophisticated understanding that allows them to communicate effectively, to offer what people actually want rather than what they claim to want, to build relationships based on mutual understanding rather than surface-level interaction. They learn to recognize the difference between what people say they want and what they actually respond to. They understand that most human behavior is driven by unconscious needs that people themselves don't fully understand. They develop the ability to speak to these deeper motivations while allowing others to maintain their dignity and self-respect. This psychological sophistication extends to their understanding of group dynamics as well. They learn how influence flows through organizations, how decisions really get made, how informal networks often matter more than formal hierarchies. They identify the key relationships that determine outcomes, the critical moments when interventions can change trajectories, the leverage points where small actions produce large results. The sixth insight that transforms their effectiveness involves mastering the balance between visibility and invisibility. They understand when to step forward and when to remain in the background, when to take credit and when to deflect it, when to be seen as the source of an idea and when to allow others to claim ownership. This tactical flexibility allows them to maintain influence regardless of changing circumstances. When public leadership is required, they can step into that role convincingly. When behind-the-scenes guidance is more effective, they can operate from the shadows. When collaborative approaches work best, they can share authority gracefully. When decisive action is needed, they can take full responsibility. They also understand that different types of power require different approaches. The authority needed to lead a crisis is different from the influence required to inspire innovation. The credibility necessary for financial decisions differs from the trust needed for personal advice. They develop multiple modes of operation and switch between them seamlessly as situations demand. The seventh principle they all eventually discover is that sustainable power must be built on genuine value creation. The leaders whose influence endures beyond their active involvement are those who consistently make situations better for everyone involved. They solve problems that matter, create opportunities that didn't exist before, and leave every situation improved by their participation. This value creation becomes their signature, their calling card, their lasting legacy. People remember not just what they accomplished for themselves, but what they made possible for others. This reputation for adding value creates a gravitational pull that draws opportunities, resources, and talented people into their orbit naturally. The eighth element involves understanding the relationship between power and responsibility. True influence carries with it the obligation to use that influence wisely, ethically, sustainably. The leaders who build lasting legacies are those who accept this responsibility willingly and execute it faithfully, even when doing so requires personal sacrifice. The successful ones never stop working on themselves. They continue to identify and address their blind spots, their emotional triggers, their unconscious biases. They understand that personal growth is not a luxury for leaders, it's a necessity for anyone who wants to wield power responsibly and effectively over time. Another principle they master is the art of succession, preparing others to carry on their work when they're no longer able or willing to do so. They understand that true legacy lies not in what they accomplish personally, but in what continues to happen because of systems, people, and cultures they developed. They become obsessed with making themselves replaceable, knowing that irreplaceable leaders ultimately limit the organizations they lead. This succession planning extends beyond formal organizational charts to include the transmission of values, methods, and wisdom. They become teachers and mentors not just because it's noble, but because it multiplies their influence across time. Every person they develop properly becomes an extension of their positive impact on the world. They also understand the critical importance of timing in the exercise of power. The same action can have completely different results depending on when it's taken. They learn to read the subtle signs that indicate when circumstances are ripe for change, when resistance is likely to be lowest, when maximum impact can be achieved with minimum effort. This timing sense comes from deep observation of human psychology and social dynamics. They study how ideas spread through communities, how resistance to change develops and dissolves, how momentum builds and dissipates. They become students of the rhythms of human behavior, both individual and collective. Perhaps most importantly, they understand that power is ultimately temporary for everyone. Positions change, circumstances shift, capabilities decline with age, and death eventually claims every leader. This temporal perspective keeps them humble and focused on what truly matters. They ask themselves, how will I be remembered? What will continue after I'm gone? Am I using this influence to create lasting value or just temporary advantage? This awareness of mortality gives urgency to their efforts to create positive change while they have the opportunity. They understand that every day of influence is a gift that should not be wasted on trivial pursuits or personal aggrandizement. They focus on the problems that matter most, the changes that will have the greatest positive impact, the legacy that will serve future generations. The final insight they gain is perhaps the most profound. The recognition that they are part of something larger than themselves, that their power comes not from their individual brilliance but from their position within complex networks of relationships and systems. This recognition brings both humility and responsibility. Humility because they understand their limitations, responsibility because they understand their role as stewards of something greater than their personal interests. This understanding transforms how they approach every aspect of leadership. Instead of trying to control everything directly, they focus on creating conditions where good things can happen naturally. Instead of making all decisions themselves, they develop others' capacity to make good decisions. Instead of trying to be the center of every important activity, they become the invisible force that makes important activities possible. In this way, they achieve the ultimate paradox of power. By making themselves less central to immediate operations, they become more essential to long-term success. By developing others to replace them, they ensure their influence continues beyond their personal involvement. By serving something greater than themselves, they achieve a form of immortality that no individual accomplishment could provide. Those who truly understand these deeper dimensions of power find that it becomes not a burden to bear or a prize to protect, but a sacred trust to honor and a precious opportunity to serve. And in serving something greater than themselves, they discover the deepest satisfaction that human experience can offer, the knowledge that their existence has made a positive difference in the world, that their influence has created value for others, that their legacy will continue to benefit people they will never meet. This is what separates those who merely possess power from those who truly understand it, the recognition that influence is not about what you can make happen, but about what you can inspire others to choose to make happen. Not about controlling outcomes, but about creating possibilities. Not about being remembered for what you achieved, but about being grateful for what you were privileged to contribute.